and I was like, okay, I need to tell Colin, but then I was like, I'm gonna tell him live on the podcast and get his reaction.
Wait, this is so cool. We're gonna have, oh my God, we're gonna be able to do like a live show every week. That's amazing.
I hate when celebrities or influencers act like they're the only people who are busy.
I swear, if they're, if the government can like track cell phone data, they're gonna think I'm like a left-wing dissident, which I'm not, just by the sheer number of protests I find myself at in DC. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Washed Up. We are coming at you from Washington, D.C. in my case, and live from Las Vegas for Abby. We're here to explain and represent the latest news from Gen Z perspective, so that you don't have to rely on the legacy media like your grandparents do. And yeah, so this week we're on episode 12. How are you feeling this week, Abby?
I am feeling good. Every single week that we record, I look forward to it because this is definitely something that I think is super fun to do. And like Colin said in our little mission statement-esque statement, yeah, we genuinely enjoy this and we're here to bring you the information you need and want to hear from a Gen Z perspective.
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. Abby and I were both joking. We noticed we got our 18th subscriber this week, which honestly made a big difference for both of us this week. We each had a lot of work on our plate and we're working really hard. And even just noticing that little blip up from 17 to 18, we'd been stuck at a plateau for a while. So if you're out there, you know who you are. You subscribed last week, and we really appreciate it.
Totally. I had the craziest week of my effing life. Okay, that's not true. My adult life since being in Vegas, I'll say that. It just was so much. I told Colin that this week I didn't even take notes or anything. Like I'm just going off the noggin of what I heard and what I had read this week in terms of like my podcasts and the news that I subscribe to and stuff like that. So, um, hopefully I don't sound terribly dumb this week, but I have no guide this week, so this is all me.
No, I'm sure not. And this week, I feel like more of our topics are kind of like we're going to really be leaning into the commentary side of things. In the past, we've gotten a bit more technical and like had these kind of long-winded stories where we did a really big setup on the front end and then gave our opinions. But this week, I feel like we're just going to be letting it rip on every single topic and not holding back. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
want
so
to?
excited.
Oh, and also, in addition to noticing that we had our 18th subscriber this week, I went in and did a little like research on the analytics side of a breakdown of who our audience is. And Abby and I both thought it was interesting that we have like a 50% international following, I guess, of people who view our channel. So, yeah, thanks if you're out there in the world and trying to understand what's going on in the US, because we are too.
Yeah, I think it's so fun specifically to talk to international people about politics. When I was traveling in Barcelona, I'd made a bunch of friends who were law students, but they were from Italy. So they would bring up all these facts about the US politics, all these things that like I knew, but like I was just surprised that they knew and they were like, "Well, the US is the center of everything." Like, of course we know. And then I felt kind of silly because like I knew nothing about Italian politics, so I was able to like exchange information there and we'd get into such long conversations about like what was going on, the state of the world, like how I personally felt. Like I think that they enjoyed hearing how me and my friend who was with me at the time and is also American specifically felt because we're the same age as them and they like never really get to hear firsthand from somebody and ask all these questions. Like the curiosity is really big out there and I think that people sometimes mistake curiosity for hate or ignorance sometimes.
Yeah, and I think like in as much as we're out here trying to understand the news and what's going on, and we're trying to interpret, Trump's like foreign policy and stuff, I think that people in Europe, especially right now, are really on the edge of their seats because so much is like riding on what is going to happen. Whereas here, we're literally more removed from it. So it's like, yeah, foreign policy is important, but that's maybe like one component of what we're interested in talking about on a daily basis. But like if you're living in Poland right now, one of my friends is, and we just talked today, so shout out Lacey. If you're like living out there in Europe right now, like you're really on the edge of your seat trying to, there's so much riding on what the US decides to do or not do.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that, talk about that in terms of, tariffs, and I know Asia's being hit super hard, so we'll
Yeah.
get into that. But
Oh,
Colin, do you wanna
well,
one more?
first, actually, I had two callbacks to past episodes we had done. First, Abby took the quiz to see which person in the Signal Gate chat she was, and she, unsurprisingly, she got Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic. So I think that fits really well. What do you think?
I was totally not surprised at all. I hope you guys like for the people who don't know me listening, I hope you can tell that I am very passionate about this and breaking news like that. That is so my niche, and it's just I never get more of an adrenaline rush than that. Like that is the most like fun thing I ever did in college, and even now when we talk about things, I get such a rush from it, and I think that's like my more of my journalistic side coming out, and I'm so not surprised that I got Jeffrey Goldberg at all.
Yeah, no. Once you said it, it made so much sense. I was like, oh, I should have guessed that Abby would be him. But yeah, the other callback I had, did you have a chance to talk to Demily and ask her about electric vehicles?
This
Because
is
we had brought this up at like episode 11 about how do electric vehicles presumably save energy because they are charged rather than run on gas, but you have to plug it into a wall, which requires power plants out there. So we had brought in our friend Demily because she's an engineer, and is there any updates from Demily about whether or not this is actually effective?
okay. This is so funny because she was also super swamped with work, like maybe for 2 weeks, like this past week and the week before. And so she had recently listened to and got caught up with our podcast, and I was like, Did you hear my question?" She was like, Yeah, I'll get back." She's like, "Let me type something up for you." And she hasn't yet, but when she does, I will let you and the rest of the audience know. Maybe we'll have her on. Like
Yeah, we
I she
should.
would give like really good insight about it. So,
We want to
um,
start bringing on more guests. Like that's something we both talked about. We want to bring on our former editor-in-chief, maybe the current one right now as she's getting prepared to leave that role. I've talked to her a bit. Just people from like the student journalism world and the Gen Z world. We have a new series, Gen Z Voices, which we've been trying to build, so we should totally have them on too for that.
yeah, okay, I'll ask her. Anyways, do you want to start with your good news story, Colin?
Yeah, sure. So continuing our optimistic openers here, I went and found this stat. It was reported in The Economist, but there's a researcher at UCLA. His name's Daniel Eisenberg, who's been studying mental health among American youth, which is something we've kind of been touching on in the show. And he found that there is an ongoing decline in the symptoms of depression among college students. They had found that in 2023, 41% of students seemed depressed. In 2024, it fell to 38%. So I guess, it's been on like this gradual decline. This reminded me too of when we were at USD, one of our news assistants wrote a story about, I guess there was some statistic that was really overwhelming and outrageous about the number of people who had like thought about suicide during the pandemic or like who also had symptoms of major depression. And it's good to know that that trend might be starting to reverse again. I say that with like cautious optimism, which is just because, you know, it's hard to track these things truly and to explain like why these trends might be reversing all of a sudden. But at least the shown decline among that age group is encouraging to me, I'd say.
And is this for Gen Z's age group, the Gen Z age group, or is
Yeah,
it
it
younger
looks like
too?
yeah, so he's been studying it for a couple of years now. It says over the next 15 years, as new students were polled, this figure grew in 2022 when more than 95,000 students at 373 universities were surveyed. So, yeah, it's a huge population sample that he's been polling for a number of years to determine this trend.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that too. I think that any sort of optimism is good, even when it's said with some caution. So thanks for doing that research on that.
Yeah, so what's your good news story this week?
Okay. My good news story is a bit self-centered because maybe no one cares, but my good news is that I am moving to DC
Oh,
at the
really?
end of, yep.
Oh,
I wanted,
wow. Holy
it's
crap, you
a,
didn't mention that to me. Oh my God.
I wanted to get your live reaction for this podcast.
That's awesome. That's
I got a
great.
job there, that
Wow.
is tentatively just for the summertime, but honestly, if I like it enough, I might even stay longer.
Wait, this is so cool. We're gonna have, oh my God, we're gonna be able to do like a live show every week. That's amazing.
I'm literally, so they're flying me out to Alicante, Spain for on April 21st to April 30th, for training, and then they're flying me from Alicante into DC, so I will literally be there on April 30th.
That is so cool. So you're getting like literally like to go to Spain and then come here?
Yes.
Wow. Wait, that's awesome.
And I'm really excited because this job sounds really movement based. So I'm going to be a study manager at for the Lex Fellowship. So I'll be organizing a bunch of different excursions and programs for some pre-law students. And when I asked them like what the office space I was working out of, they were like, "No, you're going to be jumping around to different places and stuff like that." So I'm like, "Okay, yay. Like I won't be
Well, that sounds
sitting all the
perfect for
time."
you because I mean, our audience may or may not know. Abby loves to travel, and especially I think you have a special affinity for Spain because you studied abroad there in college. And I mean, you've been around a lot of different places, but I'm so excited you'll be able to go back there and kind of maintain that connection. And this is a job where you're going to be helping other people with their study abroad. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm
So.
so excited, and I wanted to save the news for this podcast. You're like my last friend I'm telling because I found out maybe like 4 days ago, and I was like, okay, I need to tell Colin, but then I was like, I'm gonna tell him live on the podcast and get his reaction.
I'm so excited. It's gonna be so fun.
Okay, but that's my good news.
Wow.
Just personal good news.
Man, I don't even know how to like I can't even transition from that to now talking about like the news, but thank you for sharing that because now I'm in like an amazing mood. So,
Yeah, we can do like a live show. It'll be so fun. I was like telling some mutual friends of ours, I was like, this is the summer that we're gonna put it on the map because we'll
oh
both be
yeah.
in DC and we can go around to whoever. I'll be networking at law firms, so hopefully it comes out. I think word of mouth is the best way to spread things. So maybe we'll get some business cards made. I talked to Marissa about
Oh,
that
for
a little
sure.
bit. So yay.
Wow, that's great. I'm so excited. Um, so do you want to go to our first topic then? We were going to
Yes.
talk about we're returning to the state of the Democratic Party again because this is a recurring story. I really love how now that we're like a couple months in, there's these recurring stories that we can kind of build off of, like things that we've
Hmm.
already talked about. So we both agreed a couple of weeks back that the Dems are not in a good spot and they're struggling to rebrand. We've even offered them some ideas and they have not taken them. So, yeah, how do you feel about it right now? Maybe potential 2028 candidates or just their general trajectory?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Dems are not looking too good. There is just such, I cannot even hammer this down enough. There's just such a unity issue within the party. It's really hard because like there's obviously really leftist people and then there's more moderate people who might disagree with the extremes of the leftists and the leftists also look at moderate Democrats and they're like you guys aren't doing enough blah blah blah, blah. You're just I know there's this popular quote that people say they're like Democrats are just Republicans in disguise like blah 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 that leftists will say a lot of the
Two sides
time.
of the same coin. I get
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah, like that. And unfortunately that's just where the state of our politics is. Like we're a two-party system, so you kind of just have to choose a side that you most align with. And I think sometimes like super extreme people will not agree with that. During election season, I remember there were a bunch of leftists who were saying that they were going to vote for a third party candidate. And I was like, you guys, like, I'm so sorry, but your third party candidate is not going to win. And unfortunately, that just continues the rift. And if Gavin Newsom is our only presidential option in 2028, I do not think that we will have a Democrat president in 2028, unfortunately. Though I'm like, who's gonna follow Trump and get them on the same level? I don't know. So,
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of like whisperings at like will AOC supplant Schumer in this crazy like switch up. It's an interesting thought, but there hasn't really been any confirmed like indication or intention behind that. I think Jasmine Crockett, she's been making headlines recently because she recently called Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, Hot Wheels because he's in a wheelchair. So the the implication behind it being like she's making fun of his disability potentially. She said no, it wasn't about his disability. It was about like some I don't know, internal improvement like transportation bill that he wanted or something. I don't know. That's what she said. It seemed to me like it was definitely like a pivot when she realized like, oh crap, I got caught with my foot in my mouth and, you know, don't want to be seeming to make fun of people with disabilities.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I don't know who would be good for the Democratic Party in 2028. I've like not really done enough research to decide like, oh, this person should be our nominee. I just know who I don't want, which is probably also bad to say, but I just do not think that Gavin Newsom should be the nominee at all. I actually got into a conversation about it with some family members over dinner, and um, there's it was pretty 50-50 on who everyone had voted for, but like what everyone agreed was that if the Democratic Party has a nominee in 2028, that it should not be Gavin Newsom because if it is, he will in fact lose. California hates him so much. My grandma had like, or was it my dad? I don't remember who made the joke, but they were like talking about California, and they're like, California's gonna vote red if he is the presidential nominee. So there's that.
Well, that's really interesting because another one of like the rumors out there is that Kamala it might run for governor and
Oh yeah, I heard about that too,
apparently
actually.
she has until June to like file the paperwork you would have to do to run for governor in California. So, I mean, she's got the name recognition going for her. I think she clearly like she's clearly coming off of her old campaign with like momentum, or like she could leverage it into momentum for her next endeavor. She recently had like a speaking engagement that went kind of viral, and so she could do it. I think she could win the governorship of California, but then that would leave Newsom to run potentially for president. And I totally see what you're saying. Like he's not liked by Californians. Why would he be liked by the rest of the nation? Whereas with her, it was sort of the opposite. Like she didn't win the general, but she might win California.
I think that he's making strides to help himself be more liked, but I don't know. I don't know. I just like don't. I think that he has such a lasting impression from California that it won't bode well for him in the future. But maybe I'm speaking too far in advance because it is 2025 right now. But some of the moves he's making right now that I don't really like that much. I mean, he has his podcast, which I feel like Colin and I have talked about before.
Yeah,
Correct me
we
if I'm
did.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my opinion has not changed about that. I do not think he should have a podcast. Not because I'm trying to regulate his speech or anything like that. He could say whatever the F he wants to say and talk about himself and whatever. But it's just like weird to me. I'm like, why do you have a podcast? You could be doing so much more. It's giving when the LA fires happened and he gave this like really long interview to Pod Save America. Um, and I was like, dude, you could be doing so much more. This is just not good for optics' sake.
Yeah, definitely. And we had mentioned that he was having on conservatives. He had on Charlie Kirk, and then Steve Bannon just went on. I think Megyn Kelly made a really good point when she said that they shouldn't be going on his podcast because if they are, then they're going to be helping him train up. And if they're representing the conservative point directly to him, it gives him this opportunity to really like train for debates and when he's going to be potentially out on the campaign trail. And it's not that I don't want there to be that discourse. I think there absolutely should be, but if they treat him like he is the leading candidate for 2028, then he might very well become the leading candidate. And is that in anyone's best interest, really?
I do not think that. I don't know. I don't think so. Do
Yeah.
you think that there is, have you thought about a strategy that you would ideally want the Democratic Party to adopt?
Um, well, we talked about like certain issues that we think there's a lot of political capital on, and I still think that gun control is a big one. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, and you had talked last week about abortion, how if you understand it as an issue of privacy in addition to bodily autonomy, then framing it in a different way might help get more people on board, and they could kind of leverage it more strategically than they have done in the past. Um, so I think those two issues would be kind of the ones I would suggest to them. I think, okay, so there was recently a protest yesterday, the Hands Off protest, which was kind of nationwide, but especially concentrated in DC. So I sort of unwittingly found myself at this protest, which keeps happening to me as I go on jogs around the mall. And you're so right. You hit it on the head that their messaging is very fragmented and a lot of times completely contradictory. And so it was kind of like mind-bending to be running around seeing all the signs people were carrying, and some of them were saying like F Trump, deport Musk. And I'm like, okay, but doesn't that kind of undercut your own argument against Trump that you think that his immigration policy is too harsh and he shouldn't be on a whim deporting people, but yet you're recommending like, oh, Musk should get deported. It's just, it was very like, this is insensitive and kind of me mean of me, but like low IQ. Like there was not a lot of thought that went into the messaging. And that is how I feel it is from the top to the bottom of the party. Like all the way from Schumer to and Pelosi down to these people who are protesting at the hands-off thing. None of them can really agree on what their message is other than we don't like Trump. And we keep saying like that's not good enough. It's not, I mean, it lost them the last election. And Trump isn't, I was going to say Trump isn't even going to be running in 2028, but
But
that's
who
yet to be
knows?
seen. So,
Yeah, I don't I'm very obviously somebody who has voted Democrat, did not vote for Trump in this last election. And I think that it's good that I'm able to and you're able to and everyone who is criticizing the Democrats are doing it because it's so true. Like we need I'm gonna email them this podcast link because I'm gonna email this to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and whoever else because they need to have more unity within them and have an actual message other than one that is just based off of anger in regard to doing saving America from Trump, which I think for me, saving America from Trump is enough of a reason for me not to be a part of the Democratic Party, but unfortunately that's just not the case for so many people. And the fact that people aren't really calling this out as much, I mean, I see like political commentators commenting or calling it out, but I don't know why the Democrats, their politicians aren't really admitting the fragmentation.
yeah, I mean, it certainly isn't helping their case at all. But I did want to call out some Democrats who I think could be on the come up because, as we mentioned, like they don't have a presumptive nominee, but there's some names that I think we should watch. Jake Auchincloss of I think Massachusetts, he's a rep right now. Jeff Jackson, who was a rep from North Carolina, who's now the Attorney General there, and Jon Ossoff, who's a senator from Georgia.
I love Jon Ossoff.
I think all of them are old enough to run potentially, and they come from Congress, so that background isn't necessarily translate into being like a competent executive, but they're all very like polished, and I feel like they can stay on message, and they're still formulating what that message might be, but I see them as sort of like rising stars in the Democratic Party. The other one being Elisa Slotkin she's a senator from Michigan. She got some notoriety from grilling Pete Hegseth
Hmm.
when he was, up for defense secretary. I don't know. I think she's an interesting one. She comes from a background in like national security, but all of these candidates or all these people I just mentioned, they seem to me to be, like I said, well-spoken, polished, can stay on message, and they're pretty moderate. So like I think the Democrats really need to swing back to the middle because they were so far out on the left. I think the ad that lost a lot of support was the ad where Trump said that Kamala is for they, them, and Trump is for you. There's been some kind of like after the fact polling that indicates that that ad really affected people a lot, and I've heard people comment that that was a really powerful ad. And so the Democrats need to now come back to the middle, and I think any of those people I just mentioned are fully capable of representing moderate Democrats.
I agree with you. I think AOC is a little too extreme to run for president, bringing it back to her. And I don't really see her moderating herself um in the near future. I think that yeah, we need somebody who is more middle of the line to be able to win the opinions of most people, especially independent voters. Like independent voters and people who don't know who they're going to vote for and swing voters aren't going to be voting for an extremist. I mean, I guess there was Trump, so I mean if they did vote for Trump, then I could categorize Trump as an extremist. But if you're more right-leaning and you're on the fence and the Democrats have a more left person in line, then they don't want to vote for that. And I think that you have a really good point in making sure that the person is more middle of the line.
And how would you feel about Kamala making a comeback for president? Like, do you think she has what it takes to clear that hurdle?
I'm like 50-50 on whether or not she could win, just because I haven't really seen anything from her talking about what she did wrong or what she could have done better and stuff like that. Like I haven't seen her be a part of changing that messaging. It's still this anti-Trump speech, and I love an anti-Trump speech, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's for everybody, and I think that's what the issue is. Like if she were to run again and she wants to win, she'll need a major, major rebrand. And I don't know if you remember this. I might have been texting you about it, but do you remember over the summer, like last summer, when Biden dropped out of the race and then Kamala was really hot and heavy in
Installed.
the first yeah in the first couple weeks I remember texting maybe you, maybe it was another friend or maybe it was just Marissa because I was living with her at the time, but we were talking about how Kamala was doing a really great rebrand, and I did really think that for like
Mhm.
the first month, and then I
Mhm.
was like, wait, all she's talking about is how she's anti-Trump, and she's not really taking sides on really anything too controversial. Like she was flip-flopping on a lot of things, and I don't think that bodes well with voters, and I think people want answers.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing that they kept doing was that they were referring to like the Democrats as the party of defending democracy. And that was just really hard to stomach with the way that the Democrats had kind of stifled their primary process, and they didn't really allow for there to be a primary against Biden, which is why he ended up being the nominee, which is why when he dropped out, they had to kind of prop up Kamala. Like, not that Kamala wasn't qualified, but she was sort of presumed to be the replacement for Biden. There wasn't a lot of discussion about like, well, who else would actually have more of like a general election um, shot. So I really like want to like Kamala. I've wanted to like her for a really long time, but it's like listening to her, she she talks in a circle, and that is a problem because she can't stay on message. And she has these like verbal crutches that she'll go back to over and over and over again. Like she'll say like it's all about the hopes and the aspirations and the dreams of the American people who are fighting and da, 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 da. And it just goes like on and on and on, like without going anywhere. And I
Hmm.
do think that's a huge problem. Like she was kind of out of shape when like to run when she was up and when it was her time. And apparently the New York Post was reporting this week that she was surprised that she lost the election. Like the way they said it was she bought the hype and she really thought like she was gonna win. And to me, I thought she had a 50% chance at best. Like on a good day, I thought there was a 50% chance. And I think she should have been like going in with the mentality of like we're down and we have to prove something and we're gonna f like stay on message and craft our own message. And now that Biden's out, like it's our time and we're ready to go. And that wasn't what happened.
Yeah, she totally needed to focus more on the swing states too. Um, Last week we talked about, or maybe no, that was 2 weeks ago. We talked about Trump's ambiguity and how he uses that to his advantage. But I almost think Kamala's ambiguity and her vagueness is her weakness. Like when you look at like the two sides of the coin, I guess, and how you
Hmm.
were just saying how she talks in a circle and says the same things and kind of refuses to take a true stance on some of the topics. Like, yeah, I think that that vagueness is killer to her, and it did kill her in that election.
She does a lot of like waxing poetic where she starts to say something that you think is going to be like really profound, but then she just doesn't quite get there. And it's like after that happens over and over and over again, I just feel like disappointed by her. And I know that sounds really like mean, but I really wanted her to I wanted her to beat Trump, honestly. And I was disappointed when she couldn't get there.
Me too. Okay. I think that the time is running down, but it's
Yep.
time for us to do our Bury the Lead segment. I think that 2 weeks ago you went first, so I think this time I'll go first.
Yeah, it's your turn for Bury the Lead, where we deliver our hottest takes in the last 5 minutes of our Zoom call. So here Abby is.
Okay, so this week's topic for me is I'm going to talk about how I am in favor of screens being banned in schools. I think that this legislature is something that like both the blue and the red is getting along with. As of March, there are more than a dozen states that have decided to sign and pass some bills, such as California and Florida, who obviously are both very opposite sides of the spectrum. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I had recently listened to Ezra Klein's podcast where he interviewed Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if I pronounced his last name right,
Hmm?
but the title is Our Kids Are the Least Flourishing Generation We Know of, and I 1000% agree with this. If you look at a lot of the Gen Z or younger Gen Z and Gen Alpha, their socialization skills have been greatly impacted by screens, but also by COVID. And I just think that we're stacking the odds against them. Personally, I went to a school with no phones allowed ever. And I think that that is one of the few things that my very strict Catholic schools have done right. I didn't think that having more screens was a good thing. And you could say that we're not allowed to regulate people, but I think it's different when it comes to students, when it comes to children. This is our youth, and we're allowed to, as like private institutions or as states now are doing regulate their screen intake, especially when it's impacting their anxiety and their level of being able to interact with one another. I've heard horror stories about how people don't know how to make kids, not people, actually people too, but don't know how to make friends anymore. So they're only talking to AI, then having to pay all this money for AI, and that's a whole other thing. I don't,
Oh, that's
that's such an
terrible.
ethical issue with AI. I like in this interview they talked about how they were scared about this too, and just like with the rise of AI in a phone-based childhood, these kids just aren't getting the socialization that they need. And you could say that banning phones won't do them any good, that they'll find a way around it. But I think that any restriction is a good start, especially if you come about it in a way where it's like, we're doing this for your benefit to help you. We want you to be able to talk in cafeterias. It's so sad when I go to the mall and I see a bunch of kids out and all they're doing is sitting around in a circle scrolling on TikTok together. Like I'm like, why aren't you guys conversing? Why are like the slang of screenager is so real, but it's so mentally effective. Like I don't like it. Anyways, I'm done.
No, that's great. That was awesome. Great job this week. This week, I'm going to be talking about mental illness and diagnoses in particular, and the way that I feel like it's kind of turned into this thing where people are using their diagnoses as an excuse rather than something that they can use to benefit or help them in some way. There's a really great person on Instagram. Her handle is Raquel, the capacity expert, and I've been following her. She's been talking about how people are sort of using mental health now as a way of excusing or like justifying their behavior as opposed to motivation to be better. That really hit home with me. I've been thinking a lot about, particularly, people talk about Elon Musk having Asperger's, and they kind of use that as like justification for like why he's awkward or why he's disagreeable or why he can't get along with anyone. And they'll like say it, but in the same breath say like, but look how successful he is. And I'm like, to me, are you really successful if everyone around you finds you disagreeable and you always are having falling outs with people that like implode catastrophically? I think that we shouldn't be labeling people with illness or mental disorders to give them a pass, but we should be using it as a way to say, okay, here's the breakdown of the symptomatology of your disorder. How can we lessen that and actively make it so that you're more effective in the world in general, in a holistic way?
Mm.
Another example being that Brian Kohlberger, who's on trial for the murder of the Idaho students, they say that he has autism spectrum disorder, and they're trying to kind of use that as justification for like, well, he shouldn't be put to death because he has this diagnosis. I don't think he should be put to death because I don't like the death penalty, but I think like using a diagnosis as a way of kind of like getting yourself out of a tough spot, that really just bothers me on every single level. Like I said, I think we shouldn't glorify mental illness. We shouldn't try to like make everything into a trauma, or we shouldn't like be falling back on diagnoses. We should be using it as an incentive and a framework for how to actually improve our lives by lessening symptomatology.
Okay, guys, we just did our bury the lead. I feel like that was the one that was the closest call to being like, I think that I definitely used my full 2.5 minutes. But like we said last time, it's really hard when the last minute isn't a timer, but it just says 1 minute less or less than a minute left. And I think that you did a really good job of articulating what you were trying to say, and I think that these segments are so fun.
Yeah, and I thought you were a lot more eloquent than me, and I was trying to kind of like I obviously had to talk very fast and like try to communicate everything I wanted to say very fast, but that was one of the issues where I was like I had to kind of keep it within some guardrails because I really didn't want to like misconstrue it like somehow I was saying like you know, obviously I support people and think they should be validated in terms of like if they have a diagnosis and we shouldn't stigmatize it. And I'm very much against like stigmatizing people seeking out help. But I just feel like the way that it's kind of the way that it's sort of turned into what it is now and people are kind of enabled by their diagnoses really bothers me. So hopefully I was clear, and if not, I just clarified it a little bit.
Yeah, I think you did a good job. I think that I agree with the fact that people shouldn't, like, if you go into it thinking that people are inhibited by maybe a symptom or whatever, there's this sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy. And
Yeah.
I think it's so possible for everyone to live normal lives with resources. And um, I was telling Colin, I've been watching Love on the Spectrum a lot, and I think that these people are just amazing examples of what love could be because they have a lot of ego that is left out. And I've been looking at it as an example of what I should follow and not be um participating in letting my ego get in the way of finding a match or friendship or you know what I'm saying, like, and I think that um their resources, and they show a lot of their family and stuff in it too. You could just tell that they were raised with really good resources and a good support system that allows them to be these such great adults. Like they're not being infantilized, they're not being like, oh, because I have autism, then I can't do A, B, and C. And if anything, they're being
Right.
encouraged. And I think that was kind of what the what you were trying to say.
Yeah, like there's a way that I think we can normalize people who fall outside of like the normal range a little bit more and like open up our minds to what humans can be like and how we can all exist in the world without also like normalizing it as a way in the sense of like people making excuses or staying stuck where they are. So yeah. About your topic though for Bury the Lead, I agree. I mean, I think like making it a state issue makes sense to me. So like the states should each try out different things and like we'll see kind of what works based off of that.
Yeah, and it's really refreshing to see when red and blue agree nowadays.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that that's uplifting, a little bit optimistic within itself that everyone's kind of looking at these screens and AI and the effect that technology is having on children and their mental and social development and thinking to themselves like, yeah, like this is not a good thing. As a society, we need to help the future, like these children who are supposedly the least flourishing generation. Like that sucks. I think that Gen Alpha has a lot of cards stacked against them, and if there's anything that we could do to help them, then in full support of it.
Yeah, and what you brought up about people like using AI to supplement their social interaction, that disturbs me on so many levels. Like,
So Black Mirror.
oh my God, like unfortunately, I do know a couple of people who I feel like rely on it very heavily, and I really don't use it at all. Like I plainly do not use AI for really anything that I do. And so to me, the fact that another person could be like literally supplementing a whole area of their life to AI just unsettles me deeply. But I think there will be like uses we can derive from it now that it's out there, but yeah, so many
Yeah.
concerns that raises.
I think that AI is a very great tool for a lot of different jobs and a lot of different resources. I don't think that kids should be using it to write their essays or people should be using it as therapists or, or like having full-blown relationships with AI. I know there's some stories about that as well. I don't think that's good at all, but I also think that since the can of worms has been open, there's no way of going back. So we have to work with what we have now. It's only going to grow bigger and be more ingrained in our life. And I think that that is why I'm a fan of something like banning screens for kids, or not screens. I'm sure they have laptop, like school laptops and stuff, but phones and stuff because we can start be putting these restrictions on and making sure that our future is set up well. But I don't think um, AI is intentionally evil. I just think that sometimes people are using it in a way that it shouldn't be used. And again, like what we were just saying, supplementing social interactions that you just can't replace human contact like that. You can't.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you said, a can of worms, or kind of like Pandora's box, where like you open it up and all of this like nonsense comes out, and you really have to like deal with the ramifications of it because you can't put it back. I'm mixing metaphors, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
All the metaphors.
All the metaphors. That's what it feels like, though. It's like AI really feels like all the metaphors happening at once. Because it's such an
Yeah.
unknown. Like we don't. It's yet to be seen what the normative impact of it is going to be on society. So, yeah.
Anyways, that's why I'm a fan, and that is our little analysis on our Bury the Lead. As you can tell, we went a little above 5 minutes by just talking about it more, but I do think that there is value in us trying to articulate our thoughts as fast as we
Oh,
can in
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
last
yeah.
2.5 minutes. Like, I still think
Definitely.
I still think this segment is valid.
For
Um,
sure.
anyways, moving
Another
on.
thing that is yet to be seen, the ramifications of, is tariffs. So, Abby, do you want to get into that?
That was a really good transition. Okay,
Thank you.
yes. We
I
are
didn't
talking
use AI to
about
write it.
we're going to be talking about our next news topic. So, I think on Wednesday, Trump had announced, let me pull up and make sure I get the right percentage. Um, yes, new tariffs with trading partners, a 34% tax on imports from China and 20% on the EU, while also imposing a 10% baseline tax on imports from all countries in response to what Trump is calling a economic emergency. He's also calling it Liberation Day. So we're finally being freed from the liberation of a bad economy, stuff like that. That's like the rhetoric. I just pulled this data from AP News, by the way. That wasn't off my noggin. Um, but yeah, unfortunately, I I don't know what we're going to see from this, but basically we're seeing a lot of stock market crashes and not good things for local markets and people's businesses and things in place like that. Have you seen anything impacted locally or anything like that within your life, Colin?
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it quite ironic. He was calling it Liberation Day, where he had this press conference to announce these tariffs. And anyone who is a proponent of free trade, I think would find that quite ironic that tariffs and protectionist policy, which is sort of like this America First agenda, where we try to bring all the manufacturing back here and bring the jobs back, quote unquote. They that is not really true free trade. It's kind of antithetical to free trade. Free trade would be allowing all the countries to exchange goods freely without regulation, um, and companies to decide where they want to set up shop and how they want to run their factories and who they want to hire. That would be free trade. That would be like liberated, if you want to say it that way. So protectionist policies like tariffs and the ones that Trump are now implementing in particular are really going to constrain that and limit people's ability to make these decisions for themselves, which inevitably is going to probably drive up consumer prices a lot. People
Hmm.
always say like tariffs are a tax on the consumer. Um, I think that that would make a lot of sense. I also don't think that many factories are really gonna like return to the US, especially knowing that Trump is only going to be president for the next 4 years. I
And
knock
this will
knock on
likely
wood. Like
And
how,
any sane person will reverse this. I'm sorry. Like, who is a
yeah.
fan of this? This is not liberating at all. Like, I agree with you. It's a very ironic name.
That's what I was gonna say. This might be another issue where the right and the left can find some common agreement. I found this quote from Ronald Reagan I wanted to bring up on tariffs where he said, you see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. And then he kind of just goes on to explain like what I just did about he says homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making innovative management and technological changes. So just the way that like this policy is not going to do what I think they think it will. It probably is not going to bring droves of factories back to the US. It's just going to cause unemployment and consumer prices to go up.
Yeah, we are gonna enter a recession. I think that there's a lot of indicators of a recession. All the economists that I listen to slash have looked up have been trashing on this Liberation Day. And even like more Republican people that I talk to, some family members, whoever, have been like, yeah, this is not a good idea. And it's just like really ironic to me because Trump is here, like, I'm gonna make America great again. I'm gonna be making sure our economy is good. Like, that is a lot of the reason why some people vote for him.
Hmm.
Some people will be like, yeah, well, I don't agree with Trump and I don't like him as a person. Obviously, I don't like somebody who's been accused of sexual assault so many times. But unfortunately, I'm going to vote for what I think is going to benefit me. So, and that's economics, you know what I'm saying? So that's really ironic that this is pushing back on them, and I'm very interested to see how those types of people who aren't MAGA loyalists, but are the people who voted for the change, the quote, the change of the economy and to quote, make America great again in that way. Um, there's this rhetoric going around. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's Magda, make America greatly depressed again. That the left side has come up with. I think SNL might have done a little jokey joke on that too, and I think it's really good wordplay there.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I've also seen like people are referring to like back in '08 there was like recession pop and there's sort of like this like style of like
Yes.
music that was really popular back then and maybe 2012 as well. And I keep hearing people like bring up like bring back recession pop. Like at least if we're gonna have a recession, like have good music or have like the aesthetic of there's sort of like an aesthetic of recession, I think, where people are obviously like more intentional about how they're spending their money, like their economical way of being in the world and how when you're in like an economic downturn, it has this ripple effect through culture. And so if in fact we are headed for that, it'd be interesting. Maybe we'll get some good music out of it or something.
Totally. I actually heard this analysis from a creator on TikTok. Oh my gosh. If this somehow goes viral, I'm so sorry. I don't remember your name. Find her. But she was analyzing the recession and she was saying how during times of recession, people aren't trying to look at things like influencers and celebrity and like admire them, but more so they want to feel inspired over looking at things and aspiring to do something like that. Like there's a reason why people are being even harder on celebrities right now and harder on influencers and people like that who have this absorbent amount of wealth who are still okay in this in the state of the world right now in the state of the US is because people aren't looking to like mimic that and intake that during a recession, but more so they're looking to create. They're looking to make art. They're looking to um, do and make something of themselves that isn't just watching an influencer open up their millions and millions of hauls and PR packages that they get for free as people, when that's not the case for a lot of people in the US right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that brings me back to a sign that I saw yesterday at the Hands Off protest, which I swear if they're if the government can like track cell phone data, they're gonna think I'm like a left-wing dissident, which I'm not, just by the sheer number of protests I find myself at in DC. But anyway, at the Hands Off protest, someone had a sign that said like the many, not the money, and some wordplay there, and whatever. But it kind of speaks to what you're saying of like people don't want the power to be in the hands of this like elite, super wealthy group anymore. And this has been that might be an effective line of attack for the Democrats because we've been talking about since Trump's inauguration with all of like his tech billionaire friends there, how the optics of that were sort of like let them eat cake a little bit, like the French
Hmm.
Revolution, this the stark class contrast, and like who is his policy really aimed at helping? So if the Democrats can find a way to leverage that into what you're describing, the sort of like anger or bitterness or turning that anger and bitterness from the class divide into an aspirational thing, if they can find a way to effectively do that, yeah, I mean they could win the next election off of that, I think.
Yeah, maybe we're onto something here. Maybe we should send this to people because that is so true. I think it's so ironic that that Trump has made his name off of being an average American worker, like being for the people, like all the farmers voted for him, like all these middle class people voted for him because they somehow see themselves in him. God knows why. His rhetoric is just so powerful, which is something I will give him, unfortunately, that he does have a lot of strategy when it comes to that. If I think the Democratic Party could do really well if we do what you just said and like take that maybe anger or bitterness and apply it to the average American worker, like especially if we're about to be in a recession. Like I think that the Democrats can do really well with a strategy like that instead of just anti-Trump.
They have to be really careful though, because you can't just like stoke class division. I think that that's kind of problematic and unhelpful, and we shouldn't be like pushing for some kind of French Revolution type thing. But we should be doing is, like you said, pointing out he ran on this, he
Just
ran
point
on
out the hypocrisies.
yeah, point out hypocrisy and say he ran his base of elector supporters come from this class and his policy is most hurting that class. Like you can't see that reality and reconcile those two things. It's like yeah, I don't know. It shouldn't be stoking class division. It should just be pointing out the obvious impact that his policies I mean, yet to be seen, but I'm assuming at this point with all of the economists that I've listened to so far that this is going to impact middle America the hardest.
Unfortunately, yes. And I think maybe that could be a silver lining into what good can come out of something like this. Good, I say very cautiously, besides just, recession pop and other forms of creativity that seem to happen during a recession. Which is also why I think our podcast can make it during this time. People want to learn, people want to create and engage in things that are mentally stimulating during a recession because they don't want to be mindlessly watching people again like open up presents and stuff like that. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a I'm a bit loyal to a couple of my influencers. I will not lie. But so like maybe that makes me hypocritical in saying that, but I don't think that that's where the general population want to receive entertainment anymore from right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you had wanted to bring up a little bit more about influencers at the moment and how you feel like they're not really rising to the occasion or they're being very selective in like their commentary about things. So do you want to get into that a bit?
Yeah, I'll just go into it a little bit because I could honestly talk about this forever. I was texting a few friends about specifically Chapel Roan's interview with Call Her Daddy. And don't get me wrong, I love Chapel. I saw her perform. I think she's an amazing performer. I love her voice. I love her songs. And for the most part, I try not to listen to celebrity interviews as much because I had this fear that I won't like their personality. So I'll stop listening to their art. Um, but I'm still gonna listen to her. Anyways, she kind of went on this rant about how she doesn't want to be looked at this as somebody who has political answers, how it's really hard to be politically educated when she has to, quote, eat, sleep, perform, write, and exercise. It was like that wasn't a direct quote, but it was like something of the sort. She had said something like, "It's impossible, you guys." And I had seen so many stitches being like, "Girl, imagine doing that, barely making rent, like doing that, and still having time somehow to do a little bit of research." And I am definitely somebody who does not give a crap about celebrities um endorsing people or talking about politics. I don't think celebrities are people that you should go to for your firsthand source. But unfortunately, if you make yourself political, I don't think you're allowed to go back from that. Chappell is somebody who has stood up time and time again and said that she does not stand for hate against trans rights, and she dressed up as a Statue of Liberty at um I think that was Gov Ball in New York.
Mhm.
And she had quoted um the inscription on the Statue of Liberty and talked about how marginalized people need help and things like that. And if you go and do that only what, 10 months ago, and then you go on an interview and say, why are people looking at me for political answers? I'm sorry, girl, but sometimes people like are only looking at these people, and if you're opening up that door, then you're not allowed to close it. And I think that's what is annoying to me is when celebrities or people act, I hate when celebrities or influencers act like they're the only people who are busy. You are not the only people who are busy. At
Yes.
least you can afford your rent. Like, at least you can afford your groceries. I'm not saying like I'm there. Like, I'm very lucky. I'm fine and all that sorts of things. But I'm just saying like you are not the only people who have no time to do anything. And saying that it's impossible for you to be politically educated because you have no time is such a slap in the face to all the other um people who actually have no time. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. And I think maybe what I get like kind of, I don't know, triggered is the right word, but like entitlement really is one of those things that like gets me. Like there's few things that I see out in the world that I'm like have
Hmm.
a really hard time like truly digesting, but entitlement is one of those things where like yeah, like people are expecting more than what everyone else is given without really any like just rationale. So I don't know if that necessarily applies in this case with Chappell Roan, but maybe you think like because she has a certain following or status, you think she like feels entitled in a certain way?
Yeah, I don't really know her personality that much because like I don't really like I don't know her obviously. I know she's from the Midwest. She probably has some conservative family members, which also I don't care about. I think it's really weird when people attack other people for having family members who are conservative and they're like, I don't know why they don't distance themselves. Like, I think that's a whole other rant that I could go on. Some people have decided to attack her on that, and I don't think that's valid at all. I think that if you're not allowed to pick your family, and um if you are supported and loved by them, then I think that there could be conversation there about not distancing yourself just because of politics when it comes to your blood, like it's your blood family, you know? Anyways, I
Yeah.
don't want to get into that because that'll turn into a whole other rant. But I don't know. I think I agree with what you said about entitlement, and I just think that it's rubbing people the wrong way to hear that from somebody who obviously has found a lot of success. I know she's talked in the past about being on the being on the street and like not having like home benefits from being an independent artist, and that's who she's advocating for. But it just is weird to me when you step back from that and are a little bit more wishy-washy now. Like, I don't know what's changed in the past, I guess, year since her rise to fame. I don't get why that would change. And if it has changed, then I think that there's some inauthenticity there.
I might push back slightly on what you're saying because I feel like so I think what is like bothering you about it is that she's very selective about like
Hmm.
she's extremely vocal on this issue but not on this issue. And even if those issues are rooted in the same sort of like injustice, she's kind of picking and choosing, and how that can like come across as being a bit performative or a bit like opportunistic because it might serve her in one way where this other issue wouldn't. So I understand that like there's this sort of picking and choosing selectivity about which political issues warrant a celebrity's comment. I feel like my personal opinion on it is the celebrity should just stay in their lane, whatever that may be, and like
Hmm.
they just shouldn't be commenting necessarily on the vast majority of social issues. And like you like they can comment through their art, but if they're gonna be like releasing press statements and stuff, I just think that's not what it's all about. And I mean, we even saw this like at our own university where they were under extreme pressure a lot of times. Anytime there was like a global event where like the university president has to release a press statement or like release a statement about it.
Yeah.
My personal take on it is like, why, like, yes, there are leadership, but like, we don't really need to look to them to know what to think and feel about things. Like, we can kind of come to that on our own. And this expectation that like we need every single like thought leader to weigh in on every single issue, I'm just not about it personally.
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying too. I think that to rope it into, I don't know, I think I'm irritated about, yeah, the selectiveness, the entitlement too of being like, I don't have time to do this, this, and that. The early 2000s when there was like little to no PR training, or at least it appeared that way, I am kind of a fan of that. Like, I think that that was like such a funny era when when celebrities felt like people. That's when I like celebrities. When it's not this like huge glass that you can't touch, like, but it's like instead like Nicki Minaj calling Miley Cyrus out at the VMAs. You know what I'm saying? Like just so unabashedly human, like real drama, like real reality TV. Like I low-key am a fan of that. I don't know if that's controversial, sorry about it, but I think that that is but maybe that has to do with how I feel about PR in general. But I know that PR is essential still, so
Yeah, yeah, sort of in a way. Like I agree. I could do with a lot less of it and a lot less, I think. I don't know, like when was the shift where we started to feel like every celebrity needed to comment on everything? Because that's really when I think PR ran amok, where like now you really needed a PR team just to be a celebrity because you have to be commenting on everything and you have to like run that through someone and get its approval and make sure that it's like supporting the brand. And what I don't know when we kind of went off the rails with it, but it seems like now we've gone pretty far. And maybe like I'm a little maybe not Chapel Roan, but hopeful that we can like start to reel it back in a bit and people don't feel the pressure to always comment.
yeah, again, I want to emphasize I'm not a fan of going to celebrities for their opinions. I really don't gaff or care um, about it. Like, I think that people should go to people like us or people like Ezra Klein or Megyn Kelly or the New York Times or, you know, like any sort of news source over a celebrity and form their own opinions before berating famous people for theirs. In general, that is what I believe in.
I
But
think endorsements are a weird thing too. Like I don't there's really no one I can imagine who would endorse a political candidate that would sway my own decision-making process. So it kind of like baffles me to think that, in the last election cycle, everyone was really um they commented a lot on like how Joe Rogan endorsed Donald Trump and like how that's gonna drive all of the like male vote to Trump, the young male vote and this and that. I don't know. I really cannot imagine supporting someone so much. In as much as I do like Joe Rogan, I can't imagine supporting another person so much that their comments about the political situation would genuinely like evoke action from me.
hmm I think that that is also a valid take because I agree with that within myself. Like, I don't think that there is a famous person who, if they said to do something, that I would just jump and do it. Um, but in a lot of situations, I think that endorsements can be powerful for pe some other types of people. Like I said, not me, I don't think, but I think like getting people to register to vote, like if you have a huge platform advocating for that and stuff like that. Um, I don't know. We have to I wonder if there's like data about like if people actually, I mean, I don't know if that's like that's probably private of like who people voted for, obviously, but like I don't know. I would be interested to know if Taylor Swift posting Kamala or, actually had a sway in some of the states or if it's kind of just it to me it feels performative, but I'm wondering if it does actually make an impact.
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll do our research on that. Do you want to switch it over to there's some early reports coming out that Musk is going to be stepping away from Doge.
Yes.
This hit in Politico last week, and people were kind of speculating about like what does it mean? Obviously, we're not going to be able to tell you exactly what it means, but um, he was essentially like on a short-term contract for the role that he's in, and that was set to expire after like a brief amount of time, a certain number of days, I think. And so that contract is allegedly running its course, and the messaging has shifted from like instead of it being like, oh, look at Elon, he's like running Doge and he's gonna be a huge part of this administration. I feel like they're kind of ushering him out. Trump told his cabinet members like, oh yeah, his role is coming to an end and he'll be stepping down to go back to like working as a CEO in Tesla and stuff. So there hasn't been a lot of like fiery rhetoric or debate about it. No one seems that like upset. And Caroline Levitt even had said like, oh yeah, like he just ran his contract and he'll still have an enduring impact even
hmm
if he's not running Doge. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel about all
Anywhere where we can get Elon as far away from the government as possible, I am so a fan of. Um, yeah, I don't like him at all, and I don't like what he was doing to the government. I don't like his involvement within the government. I don't know how much I buy this like short-term contract type thing. Yeah, I don't really know because he is I think still probably going to be involved in a lot of decisions, unfortunately. So I wonder if they're just doing this separation from Doge as sort of an optics thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've been speculating for weeks now about like how long is Musk gonna last in that role, and we both kind of agreed that eventually he he probably wouldn't last because he's so disagreeable and Trump is so disagreeable, and that's just like a recipe for disaster. However, we thought that Trump would probably keep him as long as possible because he's a good shield from attacks from the media. It sort of like directs all of the negative stuff to Musk, and then Trump can just go do his little like side quest thing and be the president.
Yeah, that's yeah, that is what we agreed on. I think I still stand by that. Um Yeah, I thought that he would last within this role, honestly, throughout the rest of 2025. But seeing this short-term, quote, short-term contract come up is cautious good news to me. I'm interested to see how DOGE changes without Musk, if it does change. Um, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, they had also done an interview with Fox where they had a bunch of other people from Doge, like not just Musk. I think Musk was there, but it was several people on like a panel talking with Fox about what Doge is about, what they've been doing, and their goals. And a lot of people were saying how, man, if they had just done this like from the first week of Doge, we would have felt a lot more comfortable about what they're doing. Because here you have very articulate, like rational people explaining what's going on. And Musk has not really been doing that. He's just been going in with a chainsaw, like cutting everything back and not explaining anything to people. And so I hope that this does mark, if Musk is on his way out, it'll mark a shift where they can kind of get their comms act together a little bit and start to explain to the American people like why what Doge is doing is actually benefiting them directly, if it is, and then we'll be able to have like actual information to work off of rather than just like the horror stories that we hear about mass layoffs and everyone in a panic.
It does make me wonder why they didn't just have some sort of line of communication before, like you just said. Um, Obviously, I'm not a fan of Musk. I'm not a fan of Doge that much, so it'll be interesting to see if they change in any, like the messaging changes in any way that actually explains like why this is good and what kind of money is actually being saved and like where things are actually being allocated and stuff like that. Because, like you said, right now it just feels like some type of horror story where they're just like cutting and cutting all these things just because they don't like it, which, in my belief, is is what they're doing just because they don't agree with it and just because they don't like it. But strategically, I'd like to think that they're trying to do something good for the government. Like, are they trying to actually make this government efficient? Like, where's the answers there? And I didn't listen to that interview, so I'm not sure if they answered a lot about my curiosities in that. But strategically, if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, then maybe they could have more answers instead of this like vague ambiguity that we're always referencing.
Right. And as far as Musk goes, the reason why I wouldn't be so upset to see him go, he brings to the table, like we've already talked about his messy personal life, how that really, there's nothing very conservative about it. So the fact that he's now like a darling of the conservatives after being a darling of the left and he made that pivot, it doesn't make any sense. My brain has a hard time rationalizing it when he doesn't conduct himself in that way. And also, I just have been consistently upset with his sort of like transhuman policy. Like he wants to transcend human limitation as he sees it and like do all of these things by integrating humanity with technology.
Yeah, I don't like
That
it either.
bothers me. Like I don't know. I don't want a chip in my brain. I don't think that that's the direction that we should be going in. And so I mean, if other people want to do that, like that's their business, but anytime we start to talk about like integrating human with technology, like literally biologically, I it just makes me so uncomfortable to the point where I can barely tolerate it. And so having a figure of Musk kind of like hanging around DC, it carries that with it as part of who he is and what he represents.
Yeah, I can't really find people who are like actual Musk fans. Maybe it's just because of the people that I surround myself with but like even I don't know. I don't really see that many Musk fans. Like I know a bunch of like Trump supporters and like people like that who are very openly Trump, but like I struggle to think of somebody who's super openly Elon, and if so, why? Like I don't really think they have a reason why other than being buddy buddy with Trump's lackey, you know?
Yeah. All right, that's kind of it for me. We're winding down on our time for episode this week. So was there anything else you wanted to add before we parted ways? I'm still so excited you're moving to DC. I can't even process it, but we've been texting and yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah, I'm so happy that I saved it for the podcast. I just wanted like a live reaction. But I'm glad. I'm glad too. Yeah, I'm all done too.
Awesome. Maybe next week we can talk about Luigi Mangione. Possibly they're seeking the death penalty on him, but And
Yeah.
left that just for the end too, as usual.
But for now, we are done.
Yep.
Washed up,
Washed up out.
out.